And we are live. Welcome to Connecting the Universe. I am author and researcher Mike Ricksecker back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. Tonight, we're going to be talking about that UAP hearing that happened a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, some of you are going to be like, oh, that was so 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I know. But 2 weeks ago. It was on Wednesdays when it happened. We had Mark Anthony scheduled for Edge of the Rabbit Hole that particular night. I did publish a little on my social media, brief, kind of immediate feedback on that. I did post it to the Connected Universe portal, so I did cover that within there. Last week, of course, I had my book release, Travels Through Time. If you haven't gotten it yet, pick it up. Travels Through Time, Inside the Fourth Dimension, Time Travel and Stacked Time Theory. I guess I ought to throw up the cover there. There you go. So go ahead and grab that, of course. So we covered that in detail last week, and so finally this week we are getting to the UAP hearing. So I mean, there's been some fallout since then, and really the way I want to handle this is really kind of step through the whole thing. This is what I envisioned right after it happened, and then life has just been extremely busy ever since then. So yeah, we're finally getting to it. So for those that are listening to the audio podcast version of this later, please join us out here every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. That is the portal where we have all kinds of wonderful information. And not only do you have the weekly interactive class, which those that are members, come on out to the after show, which will be at 9 o'clock. And then there's all kinds of behind the scenes videos, monthly Q&As, a lot of articles. You got inside ancient Egypt tour, Ireland, America Southwest, all that wonderful stuff. ConnectedUniversePortal.com. Of course, we do thank those that are out there in YouTube land watching it live as well. So I see Jen is down in the house, as well as Tom. Great to see both of you. Wonderful. So, all right, let's go ahead and okay, this is what I wanted to do. Like I said, I want to kind of step through this hearing, kind of give some insights, some little bits of detail, that sort of thing. Like I said, I know there's some fallout that has come from there, but yeah, this was the scene 2 weeks ago, and this was actually a really big deal that you had actual witness testimony before Congress. What happened? Uh, the last time around was, we had a couple of people from the government that were getting grilled, and their responses, we've talked about this before in the past, their responses were very, very evasive. And that's the day that Mike Gallagher, for me, and as well as several other people, became like their favorite congressman ever with the way that he grilled those guys, because they were giving complete non-answers to everything. So here we actually finally got to hear from actual witnesses testimony that got read into the record. So here are the three that we have here. So we have Ryan Graves over there on the left. That's Executive Director, Americans for Safe Aerospace, former Navy F-18 pilot. We have David Grush. He's a former National Reconnaissance Officer, representative, part of the UAP task force, or reported to them, part of the Department of Defense. And then on the right, we have Commander David Fravor. He's a former commanding officer and pilot, witness to the Tic Tac video. He was there for it. So these are our guys. Now, the way the hearing started off, in kind of typical government fashion, you had each member of Congress that was there. These that are sitting in the seats in the back there. They each read an opening statement, basically, kind of saying, they hope to get something out of it. They each have their own opinions on UAPs, and really the gist from their point of view is really national security. And there's definitely that flavor, all throughout these hearings, and totally understand that. But of course, as the public, yeah, we want a little bit more than just that. We're going to get into some of those things this evening. So, all right. So, who do these guys really represent? Graves, Grush, and Fravor. I see Jill Nachinsky's down in the house as well. Great to see you, Jill. Mo Mo Paratharp, Heart One. Great to see you as well. But okay, so these three, we'll start with Graves here and give you a little background on why they're there and what they're looking for out of this particular hearing. So again, he's executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, former F-18 pilot. He experienced UAPs firsthand operating in American airspace, both with radar and visually as well. And the way he uh, described these things that he and these other pilots were witnessing were these black cubes, or sometimes grayish, that were encompassed within some sort of clear sphere. And they could tell by looking at these things that the points of the cube, the apex, uh, reach touching the sphere. And these things are, in the air, moving around. Very, very interesting. And so his perspective on all this is that there's not really a safe place for people to go to report this type of phenomenon because there's such a stigma uh, that people are really discouraged from coming forward. This was something that was very prevalent uh, with he and his colleagues in the military. And of course, he sees this in the civilian sector as well. And he sees it more so in the civilian sector now. The military is starting to put things in place. We've seen this the last few years now that they have put some reporting processes into place. But on the civilian side, and not really anything at all, except if you take into account like a private organization like MUFON, that sort of thing. And that's one thing, throughout here when they talk about like the civilian side, there's not really a place for people to go. I get that there's not, like the military right now. There's a chain of command, and they're starting to put organizations within the military and the government to be able to report these things. The civilian side doesn't have like an official government agency to go to. Excuse me, I'm still my voice is kind of recovering from yesterday. And again, we have something like MUFON, but it's almost like they don't recognize that in official capacity. I guess because it's not a government agency, they want everything like run through the government. But his stance is kind of like, well, the airlines, you take like Delta, United, whatever, they don't really have anything in place for UAP reporting. They're, those are privately held companies. I mean, I guess you could say they're publicly exchanged in the stock market, but still, I mean, they're in the business of making money. So, with the stigma around UAPs, UFOs that's been there for decades, they don't want to be known as, like the UFO airline sort of thing. Okay, so David Grush, he's been in the news a lot lately. Of course, he came forward earlier this year, talking um, about recovered crash material, recovered UAPs, UFOs. And, he was an intelligence officer for 14 years. Um, he was GS-15 level, which is on the military side. It's about the equivalent of a full bird colonel. He became a whistleblower following reports from what he called several esteemed and credentialed military and intelligence community members of events occurring above and outside congressional oversight. He was informed of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. And basically, he's asking Congress to investigate the claims. And so, that's kind of been one of my concerns throughout all of this is that, when you had the ODNI report come out a couple years ago, it really focused on phenomenon starting in the early 2000s when we had the previous hearing with Bray and Moultrie, representing different government organizations. Anything that was prior to that, they just wouldn't talk about. They were only talking about modern and current cases. Anything when they would bring up things like Project Blue Book or what may have happened between Blue Book and early 2000s, they just claimed we don't have anything official. We don't have anything official. Well, of course there wasn't anything official, because there wasn't any official organization that was pulling in this information. Yeah, that was collecting it. It was all basically it was the civilian side, and reports that maybe military personnel would come forward and talk about in a public forum, but they had no place to report it, which is why they went public to it. Or when organizations like MUFON and others were organized, they'd talk about it with them. You see them talking about these things on television and different extraterrestrial and alien programs, this sort of thing. That was their only outlet that they had to go to, and the government officials wouldn't touch any of that. So, it's great to see these things being talked about now and going back into the past. We'll see some of that as we go along. And then Commander David Fravor. So he's a former commanding officer, pilot, U.S. Navy. Like we said before, he was there for the Tic Tac event, part of the he's commander of the famous Black Aces. And Tic Tac event was off the coast of California. And they really didn't know what they were going out for that particular day. They had new mission. They're going out to investigate objects that had been observed. They were just discovering this for 2 weeks by radar and other devices. And what he witnessed was, on a perfect day, was, an object coming from 80,000 feet in the air down to like 20,000, maneuvering in ways that, defies our current physics, and then took back off up into space. There's also some interesting whitewater phenomena going on with the water. We'll talk about that a little bit later as we get into, because what we're going to do is we're going to get into some of the different questions that they were asked throughout the hearing and how they responded. And I'll give you my take on all of that. So yeah, Fravor is really interesting because he was one of the pilots up there and a commander of that squadron, observing all of this. So, all right, so let's kind of get into this here and see if you guys have any comments or questions just yet. Okay, yeah, Tom says, why do you think these hearings are taking place? Do you think they know that something big is going to happen? So, I think what's going on here, when you had the report come out 2017, New York Times, which is something that Fravor was happy about because that was his case. And Graves was also happy about it because, here's something that, he's had guys coming to him for a while, because of his organization, something that's coming to light. And, that kind of blew the lid off of, there are strange phenomena happening in the skies that, this is coming from the military. These are pilots that are up in the air. These are unexplainable things that are, defying the laws of physics that we know of, and even if it was within the scope of, our regular physics, it's something the human body couldn't hold up to. So it's not human. And so, with that coming to light, they have to talk about it to some degree. They have to address it to some degree. You also have all these people all over the world now, in their pocket, if it's not a 4K camera that's on their phone, it's at least HD. And people are capturing all kinds of strange phenomena in the skies, on their phones or maybe other devices that they may have. And so they can no longer just what they've done for decades, deny, 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 deny. They can't just straight up deny anymore. So now they're at least coming forward and saying, there's something in the skies. We don't know what it is. And they're going to adhere to that for as long as they can. That's always the government stance is deny, 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 deny as much as we can, give as little information as possible for as long as we can, until, something is right in our face. Even with these hearings here, okay? Everything that was talked about in this hearing that, people are raving about hey, you know, we're talking UAPs or before Congress. Some people are even saying this was disclosure. No, 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 no. You're kind of jumping the gun a little bit here. Everything that was talked about in that hearing, we've been hearing stories like this for decades. We've heard about crashes. We've heard stories of the government, having pieces of uh, alien technology uh, or parts of UFOs. We've heard stories like this. We've been talking about strange things in the sky for a long time, and we've of course seen the Tic Tac video and the gimbal video and all of those. We've seen that stuff for decades. So there was really no new information here. But we're going to get into some of it anyway, because it is interesting to see how, in some ways, what this did was to really uh, confirm for some people what's really going on. It legitimizes a lot of this sort of stuff. So, you know, what's been on the television shows, what people have written books about, what we've seen in our science fiction, a lot of the general public is kind of been like, oh, those are stories, or those people are wacko, or whatever. This legitimizes a lot of that information now, a lot of those reports and sightings. It also puts it on public record. So it's not just on a television show or in a book, or, some guy, talking crazy in the corner or whatever. It legitimizes it to some degree, and that is really helpful. So, all right, let's go ahead and start this off where I do have to apologize. I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit here because I was basically working on this up until we went live. My last couple of weeks for me have been just absolutely crazy with the book release and everything. But okay, we'll start with the chairman, Glenn Grothman. And so, what he basically had to present or ask is kind of what we're going to get into is the questions that they were asking. Um, is just basic stuff to start with. Do you feel adequately trained on encounters with UAPs? And that's really the Department of Graves, and that's where he was coming from, where he was saying no, military witnesses have limited options for reporting. Commercial aviation sector has no reporting system at all, and so he wants a system in place in which pilots can report without without losing their jobs. He also acknowledges that there are some classified technology that is being used, like different radar technology and things that we have in the military, that picks up on those objects, which is classified, and we don't want our adversaries around the world knowing that we have X, Y, or Z uh, for technology. But the what they actually capture, like the UAP itself, that part doesn't need to be classified. You just want to say, we picked this up on a device. You don't have to say what the device is, right? What the device is the classified part. You don't have to divulge that. But the UAP itself, that's not classified. So there's even a moment within this where Fravor talks about, there's footage off of iPhones that has been turned in and is immediately stamped with uh, top secret SCI clearance only. And it's somebody's iPhone footage. Like, why? So it gets overclassified, and because it ends up with that, high security, you have to, like, one, have that clearance, two, have a need to know, and then you have to go, looking around for it. Nobody's just going to hand it to you. So it makes it really, really difficult. And so that's one of the things that they're trying to hopefully overcome out of this. That there's a much better reporting system for both military and the commercial side, and that there's a repository where we can look up what we'd really consider like the unclassified part of it, like the UAP itself. All right, so Grothman also went on, any reason why anything related to UAPs, say 15 years and back, should not be immediately made public. And that's one where they're like, 15 years ago. And Grush specifically said, only if it's acknowledging a vulnerability, and basically recognizing that if there was if a UAP entered into our airspace because of some vulnerability with our military, well, we don't again want our adversaries knowing about that particular vulnerability. So and then growth movement, I don't know, 20 years, you know, thinking that we would have updated the technology since then, and even Graves acknowledged with the reports uh, that he was getting, like in his own personal experience, was that they had just updated the radar technology in their jets. And that's when they started seeing a lot more of these different things. Is that, as we've been upgrading the technology, we've been picking up on more things. No, we don't want our adversaries to know what that technology is that picked up on it, but we should be letting somebody know about the different things that we are seeing in the sky. And then, Grothman asked about, do you pose a threat to national security? Well, yeah, sure, they possibly could, and that's a concern. I believe a lot of there's a couple different things that they were really concerned with as far as Congress. One, does it pose a threat to national security? Is what we are observing not necessarily extraterrestrial in nature, but even if it is there something that is going to pose a security risk? Is it something, especially if it's foreign adversary here from Earth? Is there some technology that they've developed to be able to enter our airspace that we can't handle? That would definitely be a concern. Of course, most of this in what these guys are stating, especially Graves and Fravor said it a few different times, that this is not something that anybody here on Earth has. You can't move like this. The strain it would put on the human body, it would kill a person. There's too many. The G force is just ridiculous. So, but okay, then is it a drone? That sort of thing. Um, and then Fravor ended up, reporting or, saying a couple different times, look, you know, this is stuff that, came out of space, came down to, around the 20,000-foot range in one of his stories that he was saying, down to 12, and then shot back up into space. We don't have anything on Earth that comes from space, hangs out in the air for a while, and then goes back up. We just don't do that. It's enough for us just to get a rocket off the ground, maybe orbit, like with the space shuttle, right? Um, we went up, we orbited for a while, and then we came back down. And when we came back down, we were going to the ground. And the older ones, capsules, going into the ocean, things like that. Nothing came out of space, hung out, and then went back up. And that's what they were observing. Nobody else on Earth has that either. So, all right, let's move on here. Garcia, there's the image. All right, Robert Garcia. So, again, this is early on. Early on, kind of had more of the standard questions, like discussing the need for a safe reporting system for both military and commercial, and also for citizens who are not pilots, which I thought was a nice touch there, because a lot of people, you and me, we see stuff. I've seen what I know for sure. One, UFO, something I could not explain, and I know others who have seen all kinds of things. And so we have civilian organizations like MUFON and some other organizations like that. Um, but he's kind of looking for something that's I don't want to say more official, because to me, you know, MUFON's been around for so long and is so well established, and they train the hell out of their people. I know several people within MUFON, and it's rigorous. The type of reporting that you have to do, the type of investigation work, the reports that you have to put together, it is extremely, extremely detailed. They're looking for something that's like actually part of the government, is what it sounds like. And there's not a government agency like that for a civilian person to go report to. Um, so, we report things to move on. And I highly encourage you to do so. If you see something, report it. So, so that's really where Garcia was coming from. I'm just looking through my notes here, and then he asked Grush, do you believe our government is in possession of UAPs? And that was Grush's big thing, is that yeah, we do. So based on 40 witnesses over 4 years, and from what they had said, that we actually do. So we're going to get into a line of questioning, and it comes back to this person as well in kind of an interesting manner. We'll start with the first part of it. That's Tim Burchett from Tennessee. So starts off with a of course, a good question. How do you know they are not our aircraft? And so Graves basically says, if these objects are staying perfectly still, Cat 4 hurricane winds, and then these same objects would then just suddenly accelerate to supersonic speeds in ways that are completely inexplicable. It makes no sense. So then Bridget turns to Fravor. He says, "What astonished you most about the Tic Tac?" And he said, the performance is beyond our science. So here's two guys that are basically saying, look, the physics of these things, they're beyond us. They're absolutely beyond us. So then Burchett turns his questioning over to Grush. Have you faced any retaliation for coming forward? And here's where it starts to get really interesting, where Grush says, that he has to be careful in what he says in detail, because there's still this open whistleblower investigation that's being conducted. That's how he came forward. Is he filed an official whistleblower uh, report. And this is something that's hasn't been in place all that long. It's because we've had people for, again, decades reporting different things, but it's never gotten to this level. And that's because he filed this, official whistleblower report that is being investigated. There's a committee set up for that, inspector general, all these, different things. And so he's going through that right now. There's certain things that he can't talk about because of that. There's also certain things he can't talk about because of their classification, that they're uh, could be. I mean, it starts confidential, secret, top secret. Any one of those three you can't, of course, talk about in a public forum. So, Burchett goes on, and like I said, this is kind of interesting. Have you faced any retaliation for coming forward? Grush says, well, okay, we did cover that question, but he was saying that, tactics are used to hurt him both personally and professionally. And then Burchett asked him, do you know anyone that's been harmed in an effort to cover up and conceal UAPs? He says, yes, personally. And then this is where it got almost kind of gruesome. Burchett asks, has anyone been murdered that you know of or have heard of? And Grush says, I have to be careful what I say. And the question should be directed to people of the appropriate authorities. Oh, interesting. So people getting harmed, hurt. Grush has talked about being discredited. Question comes up about murder. So this really, to me, smacks of the whole Men in Black phenomena. And we heard those stories coming out of the 40s and 50s, where you witnessed a UFO. You may have said something to the newspaper, or the local news team or something like that, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. You got the knock on the door, and here's the Men in Black. A lot of those type of reports came out of the 40s and 50s, and even into the 60s. You don't really hear too many Men in Black reports these days. People have submitted footage, like saw the men in, woman at a hotel. What was that? The Niagara Falls one. Woman had seen a UFO or UAP, had reported it, and the Men in Black showed up at her hotel, and they got the footage of the guys walking in. take it for what you will, and we've talked about that before, on here, but, you don't have too many of those type of sightings that are talked about as much these days, but maybe people are spooked, I don't know. But you heard a lot more of those cases back then, and it could be that they've learned to be a little bit more discreet about it and not always be just straight up in black, but even Dan Aykroyd, has talked about witnessing the Men in Black, so it kinda smacks of those, and we've had, our friend Rick Doty on here before. He's, he was with OSI, Air Force OSI. He said he worked with, the Men in Black in a bit of a different capacity. When I worked at NSA, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we had guys like that. I don't necessarily think that they were, threatening people off of UFO cases. Of course, my area of NSA was a little bit of a different realm. So, but this is kind of interesting, that there is, and a lot of people kind of, joke around about it. We've seen it in a movie that, you say or do the wrong thing, and here comes, the shadowy government organization that's going to bump you off. There is some truth behind that. There is, and Grush is talking a little bit about it here. That is still going on. All right. So we swing it back to Burchett here. And one of the things that he brings up that is really kind of interesting, because again, there's only certain things that these guys can talk about, because many things are, uh, secure. They're top secret or whatever. And Burchett states that that there are things here that they're talking about. Some of these details that can't be divulged that could be talked about in a skiff, which is basically a secure room, and it's confined. There's no way for people to record and all that sort of stuff in there. If we're familiar with those, and the ones that I had been in, resembled vaults. I mean, literally had like a vault door, and you'd walk in, and yeah. And so that's what he's talking about here. They were denied access. They asked for one, they asked for a skiff to be made available so they could talk about these things. They were denied one. Why? If there's nothing to hide here, why are they being denied access to a skiff, to a secure room to be able to talk about these things? So the way they ended up handling this was they kind of talked around it. It was done, in a very, very interesting manner, as we'll continue to see. So Burchett asks Fravor, I'm sorry, to clarify whatever was seen during the Tic Tac incident, which disappeared. Uh, he said he didn't, or I'm sorry, about the whitewater. Clarify the whitewater that was seen when the Tic Tac disappeared. That the whitewater also disappeared. So basically, it's a ocean phenomenon. And so Forever said they didn't see an object that created the whitewater, but when the Tic Tac disappeared, so did the whitewater. And I guess he and his buddies at the time joked around that the Tic Tac was communicating with something underwater, but that something had obviously moved under the water. So people have talked for a while, like underground bases, and this happened, uh, off the coast of California, off of San Diego, which people have talked about for a while. There are, a lot of UAP sightings around San Diego. People have talked about, underwater bases, off the coast of San Diego out there. And so, here it is. They're a little ways out, but still, you've got this crazy thing happening in the air, and down below, the water's churning up. So now they didn't see anything come up out of the water, but whatever was going on down there when the Tic Tac disappeared, so did that water phenomenon. Now, okay, was it communicating with something down there? Maybe. Was perhaps now you have something here that's defying the laws of physics. So, was it possible that whatever the physics were the mechanism to make this tic tac work the way it was it powerful enough that straight down below it in the water, it was creating a disturbance in the water. We're talking like 12 to 20,000 feet that they are in the air, or that the tic tac is in the air, and you have this water phenomenon going on down below, and then of course, boom, it shoots off, back into space. So very, very interesting. And then Burchett also asked Fravor about jamming, that their radars were actually being jammed. Now they got the video of the tic tac through their targeting, and then Burchett asked Fravor, is he aware? Now, this is a guy that was Air Force squadron commander. They have to know about the technology that our enemies and other world powers have. He asked him, "Are you aware of our enemies having the capability to jam radar?" No, straight up, no. Nope. Yeah, it's not something we really have, and we see that in our science fiction, right? It's not something we really have. Um, Comments here from the chat. Maybe the men in black have resorted to online interrogation. Yeah, maybe their methodology has changed a little bit. I would say that, okay, now, like in the 80s, early 90s, when I was a kid, in living in Worcester, Ohio, we always knew this unmarked cop car, because of the way that the wheels were done. It was all black, right? We knew that was the cop because of the way he did his car. And so I wonder, with Men in Black, if they picked up on the fact that, well, if we dress in all black, and the suits and the sunglasses and the hats and all that, people are going to recognize, oh dang, there's the Men in Black, especially after the movies. And I get sci-fi, it's fun with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, but this is information that's being propagated out there, quite a ways for many, many years. Maybe they finally decided or figured out, yeah, maybe we should try to look a little bit more regular, blend in a little bit, so that people don't know we're coming. Maybe. So, all right, let's kind of move on a little bit here. We're going to come back to Burchett here in just a little bit, because there's a really interesting interaction that ends up happening. Jamie Raskin from Maryland. I actually met him before. So, he just wants some clarifications. It's just the East Coast. Graves tells him, no, it's all over the world. And then, the reaction to the reports. So, Graves said that, when the video came out in 2017, he realized that this was still going on, that, this phenomenon that pilots were experiencing was still happening. And, they were having these challenges in a type of reporting process. And it basically came down to, okay, they got to resort to, using the New York Times. So, again, he was asked to, describe what was seen, his experience, and the pilots that he worked with. And again, this was gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere, with the tips of the cube touching the spheres. And those reports had been going on for about 8 years, until he got out, and then of course created this organization. And then, as far as he knows, it's still occurring, because he's still getting reports of these sorts of things from people that he works with. And he's worked with many. So they talked about 30. He's like, well, that's when I started the organization, it was 30, and we've had a lot more people come forward. Raskin asked Grush, what was the experience when you came forward? And he said he had support from some colleagues. He did get some support, but he's aware of reprisal tactics being aimed at him, coming from senior leadership in organizations he had previously worked for. And again, he mentions he can provide more details in a closed environment. But he called it uh, administrative terrorism. They were threatening the career path, which is a legitimate thing, especially within the government. they basically see it as, you're turning on your own. No people don't like whistleblowers. They don't like quote unquote snitches, right? Um, but if you don't toe the line, and I have firsthand experience, with this. I've seen it. If you don't toe the line or you rub somebody the wrong way that's in a position of power over you, oh, forget it. You're gonna get blocked all over the place. Um, when what's interesting is it was very, very different. What I saw and experienced in Alaska, working with the military up there, was very, very different than when I went to NSA and had to work with those people there. I was very young, I was 21 years old when when I was transferred to NSA. And I'd been in the Air Force since I was 18. Actually, technically 17. I turned 18 when I was in basic training. And then you go through all the rigors of training, ended up in Alaska. And I don't want to say it was laid back. It was just a different atmosphere. And maybe it's because you're all experiencing those hardships of, the Great White North, especially through the winter. So there's kind of there's like a camaraderie that builds there and an understanding, between people, even though, I mean, we are up there protecting from what was at that time, the former Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had just crumbled just before I was stationed up there. And so there was always, kind of that, what's going to happen with those guys? So, first line of defense. So there's always that kind of lurking in the background there. But because we're also experiencing these different hardships together, I think there's more of a camaraderie there where NSA was a heck of a lot more cutthroat. Yeah, and if you like in Alaska, you could talk to somebody. Maybe things have changed over the years. I don't know. This is just my experience, 30 years ago. If something was up, you can go talk to your supervisor, and then your supervisor would bring in, um, the NCOIC or whatever. You go up the chain and you get to talk and talk, whatever it is. NSA, man, you rub somebody the wrong way, and it's just, you know, yeah. So I understand what he's talking about there, and yeah, there are people that will block you from moving around. Um, you can, especially if you are a military member, um, you can have a military member living on base housing. Oh man, you can have different things taken away from you, all that sort of stuff. They kind of hold the keys to your life, and then um, if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to make this career, government position, especially working in technology and the different things that you're working on, you need your security clearance. If you do or say the wrong thing, you can have that clearance pulled. And it might be, and they always put it under the guise of, well, you've got this stress going on in your life, so that could cause you, for whatever freaking reason, to sell secrets to a foreign power. Yeah, if you seriously, just as something as common as, you know, I'm going through a divorce, or even if like, you're having, maybe not necessarily going through that, but maybe there are some domestic things going on, you know, if they don't completely yank it from you, suspend you for a while, maybe go work in an orderly room somewhere until the situation resolves itself and you can go back. It's bizarre. Yeah. That sort of stuff will happen. So that's when Bob Lazar tells his story, and he talks about stuff that was going on with his wife and how they're looking at pulling his security clearance and all that sort of thing. It's like, I believe this guy's story because of the personal side of it, not anything to do with technology that he may have seen, or they're trying to reverse engineer things. Again, we've heard these stories for a while. Bob Lazar is one of them. But I ended up believing him because of the personal side. So, all right, let's move on. I've been a little long-winded here with some of these things. So, all right, Anna Luna from Florida. So she's asking, Grush, in the last couple of years, have you had incidents that caused you to have fear for your life for addressing these issues? And again, yes, personally. And then she ends up asking Graves about a specific incident at Vandenberg Air Force Base. And see, this is the thing is that with a lot of this stuff, they already knew the answers. In a lot of these stories we've already heard. But much of this hearing was just to have things read into the record, to actually make these things official. And so that's kind of what this was. She knew the story. You know, she wasn't asking to be enlightened on it. She knew the story, but she needed somebody to tell the story. So Graves talks about in 2003. There's a large group of Boeing contractors working near one of the launch facilities there at Vandenberg. They observed a very large, 100-yard size red square approach from the ocean. It hovered over one of the launch facilities. The object remained there for about 45 seconds before darting off over the mountains. And then later that evening, there was a similar event that happened. And then she asked if there was, it's this reported in an official manner. And he said with this one, yeah, there was documentation from the event that a witness held on to over the years. Um, so with that one, it's like it makes you wonder, okay, this witness hung on to whatever the report was that he filed, but there wasn't a reporting, an official really reporting facility for that. So, where did it go? And it's one of those that he reported it, he got a document of his report, but the report kind of got, lost in the shuffle over the years. It's one of those again that it ends up being put in a drawer somewhere. It's filed away and nobody sees it unless somebody specifically goes looking for it. And most people aren't specifically looking for it. We would, but you know what I mean. We're going to come back to her in a little bit here too. All right, Jared Moskowitz. So he was asking about like some of the physics of it all. Could humans survive the type of G forces these vehicles displayed? Graves and Fravor both no. Did you see a seam or a rivet? Graves said didn't have any detail, other than these blocks and spheres. Fravor says with his report with the Tic Tac that it was perfectly white and smooth. And then when you put the FLIR footage from that event on a big screen, you can see two little objects come out of the bottom of it, but it had no windows, no seams, anything like that. Then Moskowitz turned to Grush. It says, if you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft, So we're talking UFOs, UAPs of an extraterrestrial nature. And so Grush says, yes, he personally interviewed those individuals. And then Moskowitz asks, are there programs in advanced tech space that are unsanctioned? Grush said yes. This is when we start into misappropriation of funds here. So, Moskowitz asked, when you say they are above congressional oversight, what do you mean? So Grush explains, the special access programs. He says he can give generalities about funding, but again, he can't give details unless in a closed, secure session. But yes, talking about misappropriation of funds. So Moskowitz then asks, does that mean there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else? Grush again says, yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Moskowitz asks again, are American companies overcharging for certain tech, and that extra is being used to fund these programs? Grush says correct. And then he got on to a little bit of detail here about some satellite imagery, asking about satellite imagery that's been obtained related to UAP crash imagery. Grush says he can't discuss it in an open session. Again, it's classified. And then, is the government involved in a disinformation campaign regarding UAPs? He says he can't go beyond what is stated publicly in his News Nation interview. So, a lot to take in from that, especially the misappropriation of funds, which again doesn't surprise us. We've been listening to Stephen Greer for years talk about special access programs and how money is diverted, from one organization to another, or it's supposed to go to this place, but we slide it off to the side over here. We've been talking about this for years, but here it is now officially being read into the record, which is again, what I believe is kind of the whole point of this thing. So we have $5 super chat here from Tom McNicholas. Says interesting topic. Thank you very much, Tom. Super chat superstar Tom McNicholas. Absolutely appreciate that. So misappropriation of funds, yeah. There is, the the way the government handles money. It's like, is there any reason, or any question as to why our country is so much in debt? Yeah, it's a shell game. The way the money is moved around. Um, it's basically, if especially when it comes to special access programs, things that have to do with military, Department of Defense, special technology, things like that. They're going to find a way to get those funds, and they're going to move things around. And Burchett comes back around and addresses that here. So, so uh, one representative, Comer. This was an interesting little. This is hearing tactics, congressional hearing tactics. So obviously there's discussions beforehand, and a number of these congressmen and women had talked to these people beforehand, so they knew what they were going into and talking about on many of these different topics. And you can kind of tell that with the conversation, some of the banter that goes back and forth, that I wouldn't say, they're prepped on what to say, but they know the topics, they know where they're going, the different things that they have questions about, because each of these representatives only has 5 minutes. That's it. You got to ask your question, and then that person has to answer it quickly, get your next question in. So there's not a lot of time to, go back and forth and have a deep discussion. So, you're either hoping one of the other representatives there is going to piggyback off of that, or you cut a deal with another one of the representatives that, maybe they don't have so many questions, but they're your buddy and they know you have a lot of things to ask. And that, well, they'll never admit it. That's what happened here. So Representative Comer yielded his 5 minutes to Tim Burchett, who had already had his 5 minutes, but now he's got another five because he has more questions to ask. So let's get back to Mr. Burchett here. And so he asks, Mr. Grush, has the U.S. government become aware of extraterrestrials or intelligent forms of life? And if so, when do you think this first occurred? Now we're going back some years here. And so Grush says, no, this is interesting. He actually predates it from Roswell and says in the 1930s. Now, when we think of, the UFO flaps and that, we think people usually go to Roswell, but there are a couple of incidents before that, and we're talking like a month or two before that, right? West Coast, Washington State. So, but people think 1947. And he's talking, no. It was actually before that in the 1930s, which to me does make sense. And although we don't usually hear these stories about the United States, we know that Germany may have had some interaction with UFOs and UAPs. And this is something that the Third Reich was very interested in part of their world domination, and using some of this technology to build their armies, build their technology, and take over the world is what they were trying to do. So it's interesting that he talks about the 30s. And again, what all these hearings so far had been focused on, or ODNI report, the previous hearing, they're all focused on like early 2000s to now, and almost like disregarding everything that happened beforehand. So I like that they brought up, hey, this is something that we've at least known about for the last 90 years. You think about that, the 1930s was 90 years ago. Jeez. So, all right. So Burchett continues to go on. Can you give names of those who have access to crash retrieval programs? And then he remarks, this is an interesting remark. He's like, we've talked about, places like Area 51, but we, meaning the government, moves like a glacier. So as soon as something is said, I'm sure the moving vans pull up, which I got a kick out of that, which is true. We talk about, oh yeah, we're gonna go here and do this thing, or we're gonna do that thing, and i- it's so methodical because there's like a process that they have to go through that whoever's on the other side, especially with the speed that information gets around these days, like, oh, okay, they're onto us. Well, it's gonna take about a week or two to even, think about getting here, you know, let alone, start to put the pieces in place to move over here. So that's all right. Back up the trucks, we'll clear it out, and you know, we'll put the front on, and make like nothing was going on here. Come on. So, in case, um, so Grush says that he can't publicly comment on that. Again, they get into the thing about do we need a skiff. Grush says, I did provide information to an inspector general. So they kind of had that back and forth about security again. So then, Burchett is asking about the special access programs that cover this information, and how congressional oversight has been evaded for so long. And Grush responds that he has those names and he knows how they evaded oversight, but again, cannot do that publicly. He can't talk about it publicly. It has to be in a secure environment, which they have been denied. Again, remember, they were denied access to a skiff, so they can't talk about these things. And Burchett asks him, what do you think these programs began? Who authorized them? Again, Grush says he has a lot of that information, but he cannot discuss publicly. So keep in mind that the answers that we're looking for are actually in the questions, because Grush at this point is basically saying, I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. But the information that we're getting out of this is actually in the question from Burchett. He's basically saying, there's this going on, there's that going on. Tell us more about it. Grush can't, but is being put into the record that these things are going on. And that's basically the tactic here. So then Burchett asked, what level of security clearance is required to access these programs? We were turned away, and he had talked about trying to get access into some area, and they were denied. And Grush tells them that TS SCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, which led into an even bigger discussion about security clearance. And basically, what's going on there is, even if you have a top secret security clearance, it does not mean you get access to anything that's top secret. There's special compartments. SCI is one of those particular compartments, and each of those letters means something different. So it could be SCI, SBI, a lot of different things. Mine was TSSBI. But even if I had that security clearance, if I did not have the need to know to get into that area, I would be denied. It's one of those where, okay, just imagine you got a door that says top secret. All right. You knock on the door, ding, 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 ding. Okay. Who are you? Mike Ricksecker. You know, you have a security clearance, and show them my badge. Okay, got a clearance. Okay, you got a clearance. Why are you here? If you don't have a valid reason as to why to be there, you can't just say, I want to come in. Have a look around. Can't do that. Why are you here? What is your need to know? What purpose is it that you need to be in this room? Now, for me, when I was working there, it was mostly, I need to go fix that computer, or, I need to install some software over there, or I need to run network cables through here, that sort of thing, because that was, my job. And they'd be like, okay, come on in. Um, but yeah, if I wasn't doing that sort of stuff in that particular room, yeah, I wasn't getting access, and that's what they're talking about there. So, Burchett then asked, which private organizations are directly involved in these programs? How much taxpayer money has been invested in these programs, to your knowledge? And then remarks, and I like this one too. He then remarks, we audit the Pentagon every year, and they fail it every year. Uh, lose over, and this is an approximation, uh, we lose over $1 billion per year, we believe. About 60% of DoD assets are unaccounted for. In the public sector, you go to jail for that kind of crap. And, we laugh about that stuff all the time, right? Just, us civilians, we laugh about that stuff all the time. The government gets away with this and they get away with that. If I was to do that, I'd go to jail. The IRS would be on my doorstep. We laugh about it. Yeah. But it's real. It is straight up legitimate. Um, yeah, they get away. The auditing is a joke. Yes, they're gonna get audited. It's a, you know, it's a government agency that is auditing a government agency. They don't, yeah. The DOD, the Pentagon, they're gonna get their money in more so. Oh yeah, here's the auditors. Come on in. We know the deal. Duh, duh, duh. Yeah. But 60% of their assets are unaccounted for. And we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars. Well, 40% there. Oh, there's a lot you can do with 40% of unaccounted money and assets. Come on. So here's where it gets this got a little funky uh, during the hearing. So you have Representative Luna sitting right next to Burchett, and you can hear through the microphone, she's asking, "Hey, ask him this, ask him this," and he's like, "What? What do you want me to ask him?" And, they're having like this little back and forth conversation. Ask him this, and finally, which is totally out of order, she actually got on the microphone herself. Now it was Burchett didn't yield his time, which came from Comer to her. She just hopped on the microphone and asked him how to get it on the record about the disinformation campaign. And, basically all that. When we talk disinformation, it's news. It's fake news, right? Fake news coming to us as if it is real to put us off the scent, yeah, of what's really going on. And so she wanted Burchett to ask about that. And Grush, they were basically out of time. In fact, they went 21 seconds over with this because of the little back and forth between Burchett and Luna. And Grush just basically referred them to his News Nation interview. So, yeah, it was really, really interesting to see. Okay, we're basically breaking the rules of the hearing right here. Um, so we are right, and we're at the end of our hour. So I'm going to skip over a couple here, and I already have a little bit, kind of skip some stuff, and I knew that was probably going to happen. There's a lot of material here. So Ocasio Cortez, she had a couple of questions, and skip over that. Biggs had a couple of questions. Biggs, um, so let's see here. Yeah, I'll just say this. So she was so uh Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was asking about government contractors, and that was kind of interesting. If government contractors, if they see something, if they're required to file any sort of report on UAP sightings, and the government works with all contractors, all different shapes and sizes all the time, and so yeah, there's nothing in place is basically what they answered for that. Um, Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona wanted to know specifically about the Phoenix Lights. And if they knew if there was anything different than the official explanation. And they basically answered, they only know what's in the public vernacular. Um, and then he wanted to know where can we find the files? And that's the thing is, um, for a lot of these Congress people, they can get to, some of that information, but they don't know where to actually find it. Now, some of it's going to be, oh, I've got this clearance, that clearance, that clearance, and then meet with all kinds of roadblocks. Some of it is accessible, but they don't know where to find it. It's not like, um, there's an organization that said, oh, you can click here and click there, and then you find it. They really have to run around some circles to try to actually find it. And that was one. Grush was like, I could tell you in a closed environment again. And so then we get to Representative Burleson from Missouri. Now this is a freshman congressman. He admitted that he's only been around for 6 months. He actually said, I'm skeptical about all this, and I don't believe anything in this town," meaning Washington. It's like, "I don't believe anything here." Um, So he wanted to know about specifics about harmful or hostile activity. And Grush said he's aware of multiple colleagues who've been injured. Burleson asked by UAPs or the government. Grush said both. Said they'd been hurt by both UAPs and the government. Um, so Burleson asked, so there's been activity by non-human technology or beings that has caused harm to humans? And Grush said that he can't get into specifics in an open environment. You've heard this before. Can't get into specifics. Um, but that there was activity that he personally witnessed. Again, he has to be careful, but what he personally witnessed was disturbing. So Burleson asked, we were talking craft, bodies, what have you seen? Again, he says, I have to be careful talking about this, but can answer behind closed doors. But then Burleson asked specifically, have you seen extraterrestrial bodies? Grush said not. He had not witnessed any bodies himself. So then Burleson, bring his photo back up here again, says, okay, we're light years from other systems. He said billions of light years, but there's there's solar systems that are shorter than that, but still, we would not get there anywhere near within our human lifetime. So we're light years away from other systems. There's a concept that an alien species can travel here, but is incompetent enough to survive here or crashes here, I find far-fetched. But you also mentioned that there is an interdimensional potential. Expound on that. And I was like, oh, my ears perked up. We're going to talk about interdimensional stuff. I love that. So Grush says, well, the first part, regardless of the level of sentience, planes crash, cars crash, given a number of sorties, a certain number are going to end in mission failure. I mean, that's almost kind of a universal thing. Nothing is, 100% going to be successful every time. So even, extraterrestrials who, have advanced technology, they're going to have crashes. They're going to have things fail on them. They're going to have things not go right. Especially, we don't know this. Some of these crashes may have been like a first time that in that particular alien race came here. And, they might not know, the physics of our atmosphere and our planet and all that sort of thing. So yeah, they could have a crash. Yeah, that makes sense. It might happen to us. I mean, we've had, even our own solar system when we've, sent satellites and rovers and things like that out into our own solar system. It's never been 100% perfect. It's technology that we have out there that's failed and hasn't worked, crashed into Mars or what have you. Yeah, not all the Mars missions have been successful. So so then he continues. In terms of multidimensionality, the framework I'm familiar with is a holographic principle. And he explains a little bit, derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics. And he continues, imagine a 3D object projecting a shadow onto a 2D surface. You can be projected from higher dimensional space. And then, of course, Burleson asked, but you haven't seen any documentation on that? He's like, well, it was a theoretical discussion that was going on. So then Burleson says, well, Occam's razor, might some of these be some of our advanced programs? And Grush explains, well, many of these predate that. And then, and I get it, this guy's trying to, he's kind of trying to play devil's advocate, and he's trying to find a reasonable earthly explanation for some of this. And he says, well, what about recovery by, one organization of another organization's technology? And maybe they don't quite recognize that. And, Grush is like, well, all the reports and information he's seen, there hasn't been a situation like that. So, and the hearing went on, but I loved it when the idea of interdimensional travel entered into this. Of course, with with my book there, Travels Through Time. We even do talk about the idea of some of these UAPs being time travelers, not just ourselves. It could be ourselves. Some of these UAPs that have crashed could be us from 100,000 years from now. There could be a extraterrestrial life form that long after humanity is gone from here, colonized this world, figured out time travel technology, went back. you know, or another intelligent life form that evolved from Earth again after humans are gone and develop the technology to be able to do something like that. So a lot of different possibilities on the table here. Let me see about some of your final questions, comments, and see, Sylvain is in the house. Cool. And a what if the few crashes indicate there's many more successful trips to our planet by aliens? And that's the thing. So kind of like what I was just talking about, like with the Mars missions, not every single one has been successful. A lot of them have been though, and we're of course gathering data and things like that right now, but not all of them. It's not been 100%. So very well possible that one or two crashed, when they came to visit, but others have been successful and have been, routinely, coming here and data collecting like we would do for any, you know, any planet that we would go visit. And I had a situation thrown at me today when I was on an interview earlier. The idea that if there was a extraterrestrial race that came here and visit, they would introduce themselves, yeah, under the guise that that we would do the same. And I disagreed with that because I don't think we would. Certainly not initially. We find a planet with civilization on it, or at least life forms, that sort of thing. I don't think we're immediately going to go down and say hello. I think we're going to study it first. We're going to find out who's down there, what's going on, gather as much data as we can before deciding, "No, we're going to go introduce ourselves now." And, an extraterrestrial race with, okay, we're talking, Gresh was talking about since the 1930s. Of course, we had Roswell and others in the 40s, whatever. So we're talking 80, almost 90 years of this. In that 80 or 90 years, if it's the same one, because we could be talking about, and I believe probably, multiple extraterrestrial species here. But even if you just had the one, they may have decided within that time frame, these humans are a little, they're a bit erratic. So we're not going to go down and introduce ourselves just yet. We're going to wait for them to get their stuff together first, and then maybe we'll introduce ourselves. But we're going to still continue to study, and we're going to continue to monitor. You know, yeah. So all right. I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up because we are 10 minutes over. We still got the after show for those Connected Universe Portal members. So for those that are listening to the audio podcast later, again, join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. There is the live YouTube portion, but the rest of us, those that are members of the Connected Universe Portal, we're going to go to the after show here and discuss a few other little things about this. So, everybody, till next time, time really exists.